Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church. And when I say good morning, I mean all of you guys, too. It is so wonderful to have you here. And I'm just wondering, how was your yesterday? Yeah? How often does that happen? That you've got, once a year, but that you've got Halloween on a Saturday. And what else was special about yesterday? You got an extra hour to eat the candy. Did your parents let you have the extra hour to eat the candy? No. No. Okay. Yeah. Good. And did you all go with friends out trick-or-treating? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's one thing about, what I think makes this place so special and is that, in the ideal world, it is wonderful to have school friends, neighborhood friends, and church friends. Because, and this is true, you can't have too many friends. Do you have too many friends, Julie? No, we could always use more and more friends. In fact, when I was in college, it was a big lecture hall, about 300, and at that age, everyone is very self-conscious about being popular. And so I remember the professor saying, does anybody here have enough friends? And we all kind of nervously looked around, and nobody raised their hands, which proved that we can always use new friends. And that's one of the reasons that we're so happy to have you here in this church, is because there's a chance to develop church friends. And that way you got all your bases covered: school, neighborhood, and here. And this is a very important part of why you come to church. That's why the big people come to church. It's They come to make new friends while drinking coffee. That's what they do, and so you can do that, during the church school. And I hope you have a lot of fun. And have you gotten to make new friends yet in church? You have? Okay, wonderful. Because that's what it's all about. Just value those friendships. They're going to be important for you your whole life. And lighting the chalice today is going to be Charisse. Yes? Celeste. I'm sorry, Celeste. Let's go get to work, okay? You know the way. You want to step on? Well, you don't need that just yet. Okay. Use that. You light from there. Great. You like that. Celeste, you did it. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And now, do you want to step on that and let us do the words? Okay. Symbol of light.
Symbol of light.
Symbol of knowledge.
Symbol of knowledge.
Symbol of warmth.
Symbol of warmth.
Symbol of freedom.
Symbol of freedom.
We light this chalice.
We light this chalice
as a symbol of our faith.
Of a symbol of our faith.
Here we gather.
Here we gather
to celebrate hope.
To celebrate hope.
And the infinite possibilities of love.
And the infinite possibilities of love.
You did it. Thank you so very much. Let us begin our service not turning our hymn books to number 12, because it was just dreadful at the 9 o'clock service. Am I right, Merrill? I mean, you probably hated being here every minute during that hymn number 12. And it's such a gorgeous day, so let's turn our hymn books to number 21 and start off on the right foot. As a short prologue to our normally reserved time for reflection, I want to make sure as much as possible that we're really kind of on the same page in understanding that our first principle of the 7 UU purposes and principles really has a two-pronged approach. It's not just that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and that as a consequence, all human beings have the right to a meaningful and fulfilling life, that they have the right to feel safe, have access to health care, their social well-being cared for. We must understand that principle to also mean that every person, every one of us, has an obligation to help create conditions within which this well-being can be most fully realized. So yeah, this is what we believe to be true, but also we need to act to create the conditions in which this can be so. This week, our city hosted the World Congress of Families. That organization represents perhaps the antithesis of respecting the worth and dignity of all people. Their unflinching homophobia, their determination to limit the rights of certain people, their self-serving view of family are justified by their God, who hardly resembles the God of love and compassion and healing and justice. So in our time of meditation and reflection this morning, may we consider the pain, the wounds, the violence that have been inflicted on our brothers and sisters who have been made the object of such horrendous and brutal attacks. O Spirit of life and love, may we rekindle our faltering hopes and insist again on the vision of a common humanity. We acknowledge with deep and troubling sorrow the suffering absorbed so ruthlessly by those who refuse to conform to the doctrines of exclusion and the creeds of hate. May we come to truly understand the monstrosity of inequality. The monstrosity of inequality. And so it is time for us to gather courage and to actively go about creating different conditions in our society. Because public good doesn't automatically follow from private virtue. We must summon our best selves and actively serve the cause of justice and take personal action against evil. We seek to mend a nation that has broken people's spirits. We seek to offer balm for the hurt and the pain of our brothers and sisters, and to find new strength that begins to build a compassionate world where indeed we do value the inherent worth and dignity of all people. Amen. Merrill, it's wonderful to have you with us again. Early this morning, Merrill showed me a news clipping of him playing the piano in this church, 1971. Michael Cunningham was the minister. So I guess it's a tradition. Every 44 years we invite Merrill back. Seriously, it's great to have you here. Last Thursday, I was attending a celebration for the Honors College at the University of Utah downtown at the Wells Fargo, at the Zions Bank building. And it was great fun, and I got to meet a whole lot of new and interesting people. And one couple that I met, the husband was Mormon, but he converted to Judaism because the woman that he wanted to marry was a cantor at the synagogue. And that just makes for just a lot of wonderful stories, and also the family reactions to that kind of a conversion. But anyway, we kind of went out together, and we were at the elevator, and the cantor said to me, "Well, tell me about Unitarianism," as we entered into the elevator. So there really is such a thing as an elevator speech, I promise you. And I was grateful that we were on the 18th floor and not the third floor, and began to ramble some stuff off. So it's always good to have some kind of speech ready in your hip pocket, because you never know when someone's going to ask you for that elevator speech. Along those lines, we're going to be talking a lot about the liberal religious, conservative religious divide in our country. And it might be helpful, just in case you don't have that elevator speech available, to just kind of go over again what it really means to be part of the liberal religious tradition. And yeah, you can massage that, Unitarian Universalism, but just the whole liberal religious tradition in general. The author, Paul Razor, is a professor of religious studies at Virginia Wesleyan University, and he's also a practicing Unitarian Universalist, although I never did figure out what a practicing Unitarian Universalist is. Anyway, so he's going to give us two helpful characteristics of liberal religion. While there are many ways to describe religious liberalism, scholars generally agree that its most prominent characteristic is a posture of intentional engagement with the modern world. Religious liberalism starts with the premise that religion should be oriented towards the present, not the past, and that religious beliefs should be in tune with modern knowledge and experience. This adaptive orientation can be traced to liberalism's roots in the Enlightenment. Rather than resist the Enlightenment's modernizing ideas, as religious orthodoxies try to do, liberals embrace them. As a result, religious ideas are often stated in terms of the language and values of contemporary culture. Liberal beliefs about God, or the nature of the universe, for example, typically take into account the perspectives of modern science. In the late 19th century, liberal theologians were the first to incorporate the theory of evolution into their work, and they continue to draw on evolutionary biology and other features of modern scientific thought. By the same token, religious liberals' assessment of social issues normally draw more on the findings and methodologies of the social sciences than on explanations rooted in scripture or tradition. As a result, liberals are not likely to feel their faith threatened by new scientific discoveries or advances in biblical scholarship. Instead, they accept these kinds of developments and incorporate them into their religious worldviews. In this way, liberals seek to keep their religious commitments culturally relevant
and intellectually credible. A second characteristic of religious liberalism is a commitment to free religious inquiry. And this commitment encourages religious liberals to exercise their own independent judgment in matters of faith. For liberals, religious authority is based on individual reason and experience rather than external sources such as Scripture or the church. This means that no truth claim can be accepted simply because it is steeped in tradition or because the church or some established authority declares it to be so. Liberals place far less emphasis on matters of doctrine than their conservative counterparts and give priority instead to matters of social ethics. They are comfortable with the notion that religious doctrine changes over time, that experience can be reinterpreted, and that today's best ideas may be rejected as absurd tomorrow. Liberal theologians are likely to say that religious meaning is constructed rather than given. And I think this is the most important point. Religious meaning is constructed rather than given. And to reject the idea that truth is given just once and for all time. In a typically liberal move, theologian James Luther Adams insisted that because reality is continuously recreated, no belief system or historical moment may claim special status. As a result, religious liberals tend to have open-ended and flexible faith commitments and to be comfortable with religious pluralism. Try saying that in 18 flights down to the main lobby. Very important part of our congregation is always to extend a warm welcome to those who are new and especially to those who have ventured in here for the very first time on this beautiful November morning. And if you happen to be one of those who, with an extra 1 hour of sleep, felt you had the wakefulness and the courage to finally dawn the Unitarian Church in Salt Lake City with your presence. May I ask you to please stand up so we can see who you are and extend a warm welcome to you in the coffee hour. Please be so kind. Welcome. Anybody? Great to have you with us. And up in the balcony, too. Thank you. And it just so happens, since this is the first Sunday of the month, every first Sunday of the month, our Minister of Congregational Life, Reverend Matthew Cockrum, will be delighted to meet all of you who are here for the first time, and maybe those who just have wandered in for the first time during October, to please meet with him right here by the piano, and then he's going to escort you up to a special room in this church and a special coffee hour so you can meet and greet one another and also find out a little bit more about the life of this church. So please, following the service, meet Matthew here at the piano. Indeed, it is November 1st today, and so we've got a lot of things cooking. Tonight, we start the 27th season of Jazz Vespers. It's going to be, it's going to be a special night. I mean, we love our Jazz Vespers quartet, but they're going to be joined tonight by the new director of the jazz program at the University of Utah, Chris Johnson, who is, you won't hear him say it, but the truth on the street is he is probably the greatest trumpet player in the country right now. So Chris Johnson will be here tonight with our regular Jazz Vespers quartet. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and even if you are brand new, if you have young kids as part of your family, join us for dinner and a fun program tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. Don't bring food, don't bring money, just yourselves, and join in and make some new friends. We usually get about 30, 35, 40 families, and it's a wonderful, wonderful program, and I hope you get a chance to join with us. Also want to point out that not too far away, we're going to have the solstice, but we're going to start rehearsing. The choir, special choir for the solstice, will start rehearsing. Please take a look at that announcement, specific announcement in the order of service, and get in touch with Holly Stewart in order to sign up and sing in our solstice service, which is a fabulous intergenerational service. Yes, the kids are with us from the beginning to the end. Also want to mention one last thing going back to Jazz Vespers. We do serve refreshments, and I would appreciate it if you are interested in helping out with refreshments. I feel like a school teacher. See me after the service, and we'll take you down we'll put you down for doing refreshments. We're all set for tonight, thanks to Bill and Di, and we're also set for one other night. But please mark it, and we run this Jazz Vespers every Sunday through December 20th. One last announcement, but perhaps one of the most important announcements, and that is on the 14th of November, the very important, wonderful, fun-filled auction will be held. We do this every other year. It will be held again at Rice-Eccles Stadium, which is probably the most beautiful venue in all of Salt Lake City. And take a look following the service at what is being offered. Fun personnel will be here. Jim DeBacchus will be the auctioneer. And I hear he's going to auction off a couple of conservatives, but I know the price for them is just getting lower and lower, and but he wants to get rid of them. And also receiving the prestigious Fairly Free Thinker Award will be Robert Fulgham, who many of you certainly remember. He's been here in the past, and well-known author, and don't forget, a Unitarian minister to boot. The offering will now gratefully be received, and a chance to greet one another and wish each other a happy November. In 1771, the Commonwealth of Virginia jailed 50 Baptist worshipers for preaching the gospel contrary to the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. In 1774, 18 Baptists were jailed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for refusing to pay taxes that supported the Congregational Church. Back in those days, citizens had to pay taxes to support the churches deemed as standard bearers of morality, even if the people attended different houses of worship. Refusing to pay their taxes, the Baptists displayed a fine act of civil disobedience long before Henry David Thoreau put that kind of action on the map. But the Unitarians were actually part of the standing order of Massachusetts, along with those Congregationalists and Episcopalians. And they were part of that standing order until 1836. This meant that the Unitarian clergy, and I love to fantasize about this, but the Unitarian clergy were given tax money to keep society morally sound. I mean, we still think that's the case today, but the argument even presented by the founder of American Unitarianism, William Ellery Channing, was that without religion influencing the mores of society, why then corruption, dishonesty, and vice would certainly prevail. The Universalists received no tax money, nor did the Presbyterians, Catholics, Jews, obviously not the Baptists. Boy, but we Unitarians, we were the standard bearers of morality. In 1977, Thomas Jefferson completed his first draft of a Virginia state bill for religious freedom, which states, "No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever." The bill later became the famous Virginia Ordinance for Religious Freedom. But it took until 1786 for the Virginia legislature to finally adopt the Ordinance of Religious Freedom, which effectively disestablished the Anglican Church as the official church, and it also prohibited harassment based on religious differences. Patrick Henry fought Jefferson every inch of the way, claiming that the church could not survive without state support. Well, this sounded the alarm for those gritty Baptists who insisted on the right to exercise their faith according to the dictates of their conscience. Patrick Henry argued, however, that Christianity, at least his version of Christianity, presented, and I quote Patrick Henry, "the best means of promoting virtue, peace, and prosperity." Well, when Thomas Jefferson got word of this bombastic pronouncement, he said to a friend, "What we have to do is devoutly pray for his death." Now, you would think that by now we would have figured out this religious freedom stuff. But the extent to which some people want to exercise their religious freedom these days has really resurrected the bitter fight that raged when our founding fathers were engaged in crafting the Constitution. One of the sticking points, both 200 plus years ago and now, rests with James Madison's famous argument on behalf of religious freedom, in which he described it as the equal right of every citizen to the exercise of his religion according to the dictates of conscience. Wow. Exercise your religious beliefs according to the dictates of your conscience. Is it then possible to place any restrictions on a person's conscience. Can the government interfere with, a person's scruples and set limits to the extent that the exercise of their conscience will take them? And when a person clearly articulates how his or her religious beliefs affect their conscience and impel them to act in a certain way, then who gets to police the legitimacy of another person's conscience? If the Constitution protects the right of religious freedom, then who can stop another person from doing exactly what their beliefs compel them to do? And if we do equivocate as to letting a person's right of conscience go unchecked, then where exactly do we draw the line between placing boundaries on conscience and protecting the right to live freely according to one's religious beliefs? I mean, how much of a leash are you going to give people to exercise their conscience? The rhetoric of Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, which truly upheld and supported the total freedom. They wanted the total freedom of religious conscience to be exercised, constitutes, in large part, our dilemma today. Freedom of religious conscience is precisely what Kim Davis claimed in her defense as county clerk in Rowan, Kentucky, for refusing to issue same-sex marriage licenses. It'd be interesting to ponder if Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe would support Kim Davis today as she exercised her freedom of religious conscience. The irony is that they might very well have backed her for reasons similar to why the ACLU defended the American Nazi Party in their march through Skokie. Because if you impose constraints on freedom, what happens? The freedom fritters away and becomes worthless, meaningless. You know, you talk about freedom, but boy, once you start putting limits on it, constraining it, that's no good. But as a surprise to many, especially those of the more liberal ilk, Dallin Oaks, a prominent Mormon leader, contended last week that duty to the law of the land trumped religious conviction. Wow. In other words, he argued that religious freedom is not unlimited. Although his church's religious position is clearly against same-sex marriage, he argues that the nation would unravel if people obeyed their conscience rather than the law of the land. Conversely, as much as Thomas Jefferson was committed to a just and equal society for all citizens, he may have had no choice but to stress the free expression of conscience as a person's inviolate right. And so this issue of religious freedom is no slam dunk. Basically, there were two schools of thought at the time that our Constitution was framed. And oddly enough, these same two schools continue today. The culture wars that divide us so fiercely in these times were just as intense in the times when George Washington did not want a prayer said at his inauguration. And Thomas Jefferson refused to lay his hand on the Bible to be sworn into the office as president. Now, as inconceivable as it may sound, the cultural divide was probably worse when the experiment called democracy was being established than what is evident today. All three Republican debates, how many of you actually watched all three Republican? Yeah, I see one big yawn over there. Okay, yeah. All three Republican debates for the presidential election revealed hurtful divisions among the American people, drawn mostly along religious lines. Now, I have little trouble seeing Ben Carson and Donald Trump not only as they debate today, but I also see them as questionable candidates in 19th century America, challenging Thomas Jefferson for espousing Enlightenment philosophy rather than Christian morals. Donald Trump, if you think about it, wouldn't even have to wear a wig were he back in the 19th century. He's all set for the job. Horace Bushnell, a Congregationalist minister from Hartford, Connecticut, during the time of the American Civil War, so we're talking mainly late 50s, 1860s, and the 70s, he traced the moral failure of our country back to the Founding Fathers. In his view, the nation's story opened blasphemously. He wrote, and you gotta love him for this, and I quote, "Where a faithful citizen would expect to find in the beginning God, our nation's story reads, in the beginning Thomas Jefferson." Bushnell laid bare the two distinct competing elements in American government. One either believed that our government was founded on a scriptural foundation, where God was, of course, the head of authority, or there was the Enlightenment committed to liberty and equality. Isn't it stunning, at least I find it stunning, that this demand for liberty and equality did not stem from those who believed that God was the authority, that was not part of their God's intentions for our country? Instead, that liberty and equality are viewed as products of intellectual thought that go back to the period of the Enlightenment. Wow. Now, to grasp the contrapuntal visions of government, Bushnell called for the creation of a commonwealth of God, and Jefferson spoke of establishing an empire of liberty. Now, there's an interesting relationship between these two opposing views when considering our nation's motto, E pluribus unum. Out of the many, one. Out of the many, one. So we naturally ask, how can one religious view persist given the diversity of our multicultural nation? But those who uphold the divine order, from Patrick Henry to Mike Huckabee, contend that to uphold one nation under God, we need a united sense of purpose. We need just one clear moral vision, which can only be grounded in the Christian faith, because that's how our nation began. So out of the many, one, but look what's running this show. You got to have one single purpose in mind. On the other hand, champions of sacred liberty believe that to promote liberty and justice for all, the secular and religious realm must be kept autonomous. They must be kept independent of each other. Build an impermeable wall between church and state. Out of the many, one nation means the government can only succeed by refraining from violating the collective rights of the many. Now, you can't get much more polarized than that. And we still feel it today in the race for the presidency. Ought the Christian faith provide the platform upon which our nation rests, or do we honor the truths of various faiths and ensuring people the right to continue and practice what their traditions teach them? Now, what makes this all such a hotly contested social issue is that those who believe the tenets of Christianity are the sole guide leading this nation create threats to the basic liberties of those outside the norms of fundamentalist Christianity. Now, just as our founding fathers argued bitterly about the proper role of religion in the public square, the issue has evolved now actually into greater complexity by virtue of our expanding religious pluralism. Our society today is religiously and morally pluralistic. Our moral pluralism results in different visions of what constitutes a good society. We do not share a common moral language with everyone in the public square, and so we cannot take it for granted that others in public discussion share our basic social values and moral reference points. We saw this play out this week when the World Congress of Families held their convention in Salt Lake City, espousing a distinctly Christian view on the limited definition of family and marriage. It's the classic division which has haunted our nation from the beginning. Now, is there room for discussion? It's hard. Imagine Charles Frost as Sister Dottie addressing the World Congress of Families. In fact, why don't we just all take a moment and just imagine Sister Dottie talking to the World Congress of Families. Sister Dottie would argue that their religious views create an unjust society. But then the Congress, as well as our governor, Gary Herbert, wouldn't have a clue as to what Sister Dottie was talking about. The bottom line, however, so painfully evident, shows that unconditional religious freedom, unconditional, no constraints, just let it go, unconditional religious freedom will discriminate against those who do not hold similar faith positions. Arguments that rely on personal religious experience or divine revelation are neither accessible nor authoritative to those outside of a particular tradition. They may not even be comprehensible. How can we even just pretend to have dialogue around the issue when the arguments for the full exercise of religious freedom are grounded in justification available only to a particular individual or group? What are then the implications for democracy when one religious group tries to impose its religious rules on governing society by virtue that they hold privileged moral authority? According to political philosopher Bruce Ackerman, nobody has the right to vindicate political authority by asserting a privileged insight into the moral universe which is denied the rest of us. I think that's worth repeating. Nobody has the right to vindicate political authority by asserting a privileged insight into the moral universe which is denied to the rest of us. And I take this to mean, quite logically, that if we disallow privileged access to divine revelation, as we should, then the wall between church and state can't be erected fast enough. If we want the nation to proceed effectively with its motto, out of many, one, while preserving democracy, we can't have people of one faith saying what marriage looks like, what the family looks like, who gets to adopt children, so on and so forth. Religious justifications have no place in either our constitutional or our political structures. If they did, well, you know what that would be called. That would be a theocracy. And a theocracy, by definition, undermines democracy. We understand democracy as a system of government exercised by the whole population through elected representatives. Now, religious freedom has become such a controversial issue that not only is Dallin Oaks talking about it, but also Pope Francis. When the Pope spoke in Independence Hall during his visit to Philadelphia just a couple of weeks ago, he called religious freedom a fundamental right. Okay, so where does he go from there? He said, and I quote, "Religious freedom means the right to worship God as our conscience dictates." So far, the Pope and Thomas Jefferson are like this. Cognizant, however, of the implications of extending that freedom without limits, the Pope also warned against what he called the perversion of religious freedom. The perversion of religious freedom as, and I quote the Pope exactly, the pretext for hatred and brutality. So unchecked religious freedom is perverted in that it can become the pretext for hatred and brutality. So when the Pope and a Mormon authority and a lowly Unitarian minister can all agree that unchecked religious freedom damages a democratic nation and violates justice for all its citizens, well, either it's a miracle or it's just common sense. Maybe a little of both. I do believe every Unitarian Universalist in the country will defend the right for everyone to believe, understand, interpret their God for themselves. We may be long past the time when Baptists were arrested for worshiping incorrectly, but we are not past the time when a perverted sense of religious freedom gives license to hate. Our next presidential election will be scrutinizing this issue very closely. Let us pray that our democracy will be preserved and continue with, out of the many, out of the great diversity, out of radically different points of view, we do continue as one nation. Out of the many which we cherish, let us proceed as one. May we close our service, turning our hymn books, please, to number 144. May we go forward together, mindful of our precious freedom and of our great responsibilities. May we serve all humanity faithfully so that the blessings of peace be in our hearts and upon our world. Amen.
Hello.
Hey, Marge, you going to the church auction on November 14th?
Heck no. Those tickets are $55 per person. Are you kidding?
Oh, too expensive, huh? Hey, say, didn't you and Fred go out last weekend?
Yes, we went to dinner and saw the new Tom Hanks movie. Why?
Did you have a glass of wine with your dinner?
I had to, and I guess Fred had to also.
So, starter, entrees, 4 glasses of wine, taxes, tip. How much was the total tab?
It was around $80.
Okay, so let's say $40 for you, $40 for Fred. Did you hire a babysitter?
Well, of course.
Did you go to the movie?
Well, yes, but
Did you meet a famous author there? Huh?
I don't think so.
Did you see any infamous Democratic leaders at the movies?
I'm not sure.
Did you bond with your fellow Unitarians in a warm, beautiful atmosphere, rubbing elbows with the faithful?
I'm really not sure who we sat next to in the movie.
So, $55 for dinner, wine. You can have more than 2 glasses, which I know you will. Free childcare. Free childcare, free parking, no taxes, no tips, live entertainment, and a chance to meet some really interesting people. Doesn't sound expensive.
I never thought of it like that. You're absolutely right. I'll take 4 tickets. I'm bringing friends.
Excellent. Okay. Tickets on sale in Elliott Hall. Ask about our special latecomer tickets for younger members who have never been to the auction. This is more than a fundraiser. It's an important fun and social event for us all, so hope to see you there.